Thanks for having me. Can you guys hear me? So I got the memo from Simon in the back that said start with why. So my why is, why am I here? And I mean literally, why am I here? Because my husband invited me to go with him to the Alps to go cycling. Not that I could have kept up with him, but it raises a question of I'm not making money with these nonprofits. I'm starting up 2 nonprofits, and I said I have to stay back, and it's August, and I can't have fun. I have to work on this. And like, why am I doing this? People ask me this all the time, like, why are you doing ed reform? Because I didn't really start out that way. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to come here this week. Because I haven't ever really, it's always been on my to-do list, you know, like figure out why you got off track with your career and why you're doing this. So I thought this was a great opportunity to kind of reflect and think about that. So I was going to start with exactly like where it hit me that I was going into ed reform. But Kane, who gave a great talk last night from Institute, said, no, you need to start with your ADD career path instead, because that actually is important backup. And so these are like all the places I worked in the first half of my career. And except I realized, Kane, I forgot to put down that I was a can-can dancer. I don't even know if you knew that. I couldn't find the logo for the Melody Fair Dinner Theater, which was my first full-time job in 1977. But these were all interesting places. I was, as you can tell, really involved in a career in journalism, went to the Pentagon, and then at AOL, I was disrupting traditional news. I ran the news operation there and was kind of trying to reinvent what politics should look like on the web with my boss, Steve Case. And that was a lot of fun, but then Time Warner bought us, and all of us who were running content verticals we were out. So I realized, so this is the moment, I think, that I got into ed reform. This is a nondescript storefront for a really kind of average diner that I went to every Saturday for 20 years. But it's nice because they call you Hun, and they remember your order for 20 years. It's pretty great. But I took a friend to breakfast there who was pregnant with twins, and she said, I can't take this job because I'm pregnant with twins. I've just been offered it, and it's fantastic, and you should take it. And it was to be the chief communications officer for Sallie Mae. How many of you have owed money to Sallie? I actually didn't know. I had a different kind of student loan when I was in college, so I actually didn't even know what Sallie Mae was. I thought maybe it was a candy company. And but I heard them out. I went to interview, and the CEO and I really hit it off. And he was a really interesting renegade guy, and he wanted me to do all this stuff. But he said, and you know, we just acquired this company, and we got this $50 million with it that we have to put into a nonprofit. We have to do something philanthropic with it. I don't know what to do with it. You go figure that out. And I thought, well, this is interesting because it allowed me to start the Sallie Mae Foundation, which it was a new thing, and we could develop it around college access. And so that kind of got me on this road. I realized looking back, and so then I was focused really on college access. And we did this bus tour across the country, and we met with like 200,000 families. So we came to Las Vegas every year, and this is a picture of me, I think, in Chicago with a bunch of students. We'd go to high schools, we'd go to community centers, we'd meet with families, and we did $20 million in scholarships, and we did all kinds of training on the government benefits that are available to you. And what was always striking was this is a picture in Yakima, Washington. Everywhere, when you ask the question, how many people want to go to college? Of course, every hand would go up. And then when you said, how many people know how they're going to pay for it? Almost every hand would come down. But the training that went on there and the delving into the access question, what really became clear was, and you'll begin to see a theme here. Everything I start to work on, I kind of figure out another problem that is maybe more important for me to go work on. Not that the first one gets solved, but that it's important to go work on the second one. And maybe that's the ADD, but we didn't solve college access, although when I was looking at statistics, in that decade, the 2000s, 37% more people ended up starting college. Maybe that wasn't all good, but it just shows you that aspiration for education as the equalizer and the sort of path to the American dream was certainly there. So I started working with the foundation on charter schools. Now, how many of you, I can't see you all very well, how many of you know what a charter school is? Because it's actually great. There's a lot of misperceptions. And I know from work I did later with this group, Students First, that in Nevada, charter schools have a mixed reputation. Where I live in DC, it's really a fantastic experiment that's working really well. And so I started getting involved in charter schools, and personally, I joined a board of a charter school in a sort of a kind of a bad part of town, and it has just changed the entire community. It's now the #1 school in public school in the city for high school. But what's so interesting about charter schools that I think you guys, if you're not a fan, I want you to give it another chance, because there are things you can do to make sure that charter schools get better. And in DC, what the great thing is the ecosystem. If you're interested in startups, charter schools are like little startups, and because they have autonomous boards. And they're held accountable by, like shareholders, which are, basically these authorizers that are created. And the government is your angel investor. So the government is actually making it scalable and providing not just your seed investment, but basically they're keeping you going. And so it makes a lot of sense as a private-public partnership. So with that model, we did charter schools in DC, and I was involved in them, but obviously there are many, many, many people involved over like 20 years. But now like 43% of the students in public school in DC are in charter schools, and they're outperforming the traditional public schools. In fact, I've got a chart here because just this, I don't know if you can see this, but the green pieces of the graph are the charter schools, and the other ones are the traditional public. And what was happening that was so interesting is that over time, when the charter school population got to 30%, the city started really running scared. They took over the school board because they were, fear of extinction is a great motivator. They realized that everybody was leaving, and they took over the school board and started improving the DCPS, the traditional public schools. So the model that I'm really excited about for charter schools is that competition improves and choice. So you have to have choice so that you can leave the traditional school if you see a better choice down the street, so that parents can vote with their feet. If they can vote with their feet, then it creates competition, and the competition, forces the traditional district to either get better or go out of business. And that's the model you're starting to see in a couple of cities. New Orleans is one, DC, Harlem, so parts of New York City. It's really, things are going well in Denver, in Los Angeles is starting to go well. Las Vegas is not one of those cities yet, but it can be over time. And I would, let me leave the charter school piece because I need to talk about the other part of what's motivating me. But let me leave you with one thought about charter schools, which is the unit of change in a state is the state capital. That's where you have to really push the accountability piece before you can get to the city level. So you should be paying attention to what's happening in your state capital. So, okay, let's fast forward a couple of years, maybe to even 2012. So I went with Michelle Rhee, who was the DC schools chancellor, and she married the mayor of Sacramento, lost her job, who was a basketball star, lost her job in DC, and I went with her to start this organization, and we went all over the country working on this issue around working on K-12 schools. But when I finished that tour, it was after the election, and this last election, 2012, and there's a lot of talk, and you're hearing a lot of it today, a lot of dissatisfaction with what's happening with the sort of the whole economic picture of our preparation of the workforce. And I really started getting upset about this, what I'm really calling the broken pipeline. And I was on the board of a public university and watching us try really hard, us having less and less money to spend, but we were really seeing these statistics just play out. And having been at Sallie Mae, I felt personally awful that 30% of Americans are earning a college degree, 60% of jobs are requiring them. But a lot of that 30%, a lot more people start. Like 50% of Americans were starting, but half of those, almost half, maybe 46% of those who start college are washing out. And washing out's not the right word. A lot of them leave because they don't like the system, as some of these other talks have brought up. But a lot of them are leaving with debt, and that's a huge problem, because then you don't have the degree that you need for these 60% of jobs that require a college education, but you've got the burden of the debt. So I really started thinking about how I could work on this issue. And a lot of people are pointing out the problems, and I really enjoyed Jerry's talk about the sort of the overall system and how we're rethinking education. A lot of people are starting to talk about what's wrong. And a lot of interesting entrepreneurs are starting to work on interesting solution sets, on pieces of the problem. You heard from both Casey last night from Qualifier and from Kane from Institute, which are working on sort of models. They're disruptors in the higher ed system. So there's also a lot of people that are inside of institutions who are saying, we know we face extinction now, just like those, the K-12 districts I was mentioning earlier. A lot of colleges are very worried. But it's hard for them to disrupt from the inside, because they have these structures and they have the tenure system, and it's very difficult. So some of them are trying to disrupt themselves from the inside and the outside at the same time. So that's what the Education Design Lab is going to try to do with universities, and also with entrepreneurs and other groups too. So professors, foundations, we've had all kinds of people approach us. We're starting this up in Washington, D.C. We're specifically working with George Mason University as our first design partner. And we're using, how many of you know about the principle of design thinking? That's sort of, it's pretty big out west, like in San Francisco. A lot of these cool things start in San Francisco. It's moving east kind of slowly. But in D.C., people are starting to, there's a big group of design thinkers that's starting to think about how to work on big social challenges. And I won't go through the things across the bottom if you can see them, although a lot of you guys in the back probably can't see, but it's basically a way to approach a problem with basically trying to ideate and rapid prototype and then pilot things, because with a lot of these problems, they're intractable, they're huge, they've been going on for a long time, and you can't reinvent education overnight. So the idea is that we create a place to put people together, and we're going to start out as a nonprofit, but we also know that startups will work with us, and there'll be business models and business plans that come out of this as well. So that's the piece that's the second startup, the reason that I couldn't go to the Alps. I wanted to come back, though, to, okay, so why does this motivate me? Why does the Broken Pipeline and the Education Design Lab, why do I care about that? And I think it's really about the fact that I want to work on the big problems. And to me, the biggest problem is, how do we help people identify their passions early so that they can have an efficient and affordable journey. They can try things out, like, for instance, an institute or Qualifier, these organizations that are here this week. You can start to test out both the negative knowledge and the positive knowledge that are helping you figure out what you're going to do with your life. How do we help people do that quicker, efficiently, and use college as more of a launch pad? So I end with my daughter, who I asked for permission if I could use this. She doesn't look like me, does she? I know, I love that picture. So she was 16 in this picture, and she left home. She just up and left, and I was not in touch with her. And I think this is kind of what really, this has been in the past 5, 6 years, and this is what's really moved me, because the only way she found her path back was an academic interest that in the end totally motivated her. And she has found her path back. She's a rising senior in college now, and she's studying neuroscience. And the reason that she's studying neuroscience, which I asked her soon after she got on that path, she's like, "Mom, you don't want to know." And I was like, yeah, I do want to know. She said, well, it's LSD, really. She said, I did a lot of drugs, and it's really interesting. You should try it, because when you do a lot of drugs, you really, the brain is such an interesting thing. And she is back in touch with us. She doesn't, come home a lot, but she did an internship at Johns Hopkins Neuro Lab this summer, and she's on her path. So she's a great example of passion to pathway. Thank you very much.